Hi, everybody.
Hi. It is such a privilege to be leading this conversation. So, Erin, you lead the public policy team at Meta across all aspects of global privacy and data. You've spent over 12 years at the company in this role. And for this conversation, I actually want to start by telling everyone here something kind of quirky about your job, which is that as Chief Privacy Officer, you are one of two Chief Privacy Officers at the company. Tell us about that. Why is that?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting this event and this partnership, and thanks everybody for being here. It's been really interesting just listening to those panels, and that's part of why there's a couple, and I'll explain it, but just to take a step back. I am Erin Egan. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer for Public Policy at Meta. As you said, I've been here 12 years. Prior to joining Meta, I was a partner at Covington and Burling, actually here in Washington, D.C., leading our global data protection practice, working with a range of companies, tech, newspapers, retailers on privacy. And when I joined Meta, this public policy position was a really interesting one for me because the job of our team is to go out and engage. It's to be at conferences like this. It's to listen and bring that feedback back. And if I could just take a step back, because you mentioned 12 years, it's been quite a journey. And for me, someone who's been sitting on this privacy team, cross-functional team at the company, we have completely revamped our privacy program in the time that I've been at the company. In 2019 and starting in 2019, and since 2019, we've invested over $5.5 billion in our privacy program. We have over 3,000 engineers, product managers, and others who focus on privacy. And so it's been a real shift for the company. And so what we need is we have someone who has to be out there getting feedback, and then we have a Chief Privacy Officer of product whose job it is to be in Menlo Park, on the ground, ensuring that we are complying with our obligations, that we are building privacy into our products. And so we work in concert with one another. Michelle Prodi is the Chief Privacy Officer of product. So if I use the word Michelle, it's because we work so closely, and it is about, I need to be out there, my team, and bring that feedback back to Michelle.
It's an internal, external.
Yeah, that's
divide.
A good way to think about it.
That's great. And so you are not kind of sitting and kind of focusing on compliance. You're focusing on the community of stakeholders. And what does that kind of community consist of? And what does that really look like for you on a day-to-day basis too? Yeah,
and I can give an example, but this is technology, certainly since I've been at the company. I mean, when I started, we were just Facebook, and now we're Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus. We're talking about the metaverse. We have AI. It is so critical that we get the feedback from external stakeholders. Who are they? They're people in this room. They're experts. They're policymakers, academics. There's a range of folks, consumer advocates. We need to understand perspectives. There's no easy answer in so many of these questions. And so it's critical to our product teams. They want to know. They want their products to land well. They want people to feel like they have a trusted space to engage. And so they want that feedback. And that is really why we do it. So it's a range of stakeholders in the policy community. And is there kind of a specific set of insights that you've kind of gleaned over the course of the past year or so that you've kind of brought back? What does that feedback cycle look like in practice? And what do you feel maybe proud of? And what are you still navigating in that area? Yeah, so maybe I'll use an example to try to bring it to life. So Threads. People may have heard of Threads. If you haven't used it, it's our text-based version of Instagram, essentially. It's integrated with Instagram, but it's a separate app. So there were lots of questions, and I know these previous panels talked a lot about education and transparency. We wanted to make sure people understood it is a different app, Threads, from Instagram. That said, we also wanted to make sure that some of those protections that we have were there for Threads. So we have this tool called Download Your Information. This is a place where you can go on Instagram to download your information. We received feedback from folks, experts, who were like, we need to make sure that your Threads data can be part of that Download Your Information tool. So we built it. We also received feedback when we launched Threads. People said, we want to make sure we can delete this. Even if so can I keep my Instagram account and delete my Threads account? Lots of questions about that after we launched.
Yes.
So we built the ability to delete Threads account, and you can still keep your Instagram account or vice versa. This is feedback, and this is feedback that we will continue to receive, and we continue to iterate. We have data dialogues we do with external stakeholders where we, on a particular product, we might get feedback. We have roundtables where across a range of products around the world we'll get feedback. So we get feedback, we bring it back, and people are like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's figure out how we can do that.
It sounds like your role is really that of listening and engaging and in some cases educating and translating between, I'll call them languages of the policy language, the technology language, the consumer language. Talk to us about kind of the education component of your job. How do you go about really kind of representing all that Meta is focused on to a variety of audiences that have different degrees of education and fluency in this space? Because that must be a real doozy.
Yeah, so we have teams at Meta who work on people, right, consumers, and educating that way. Our team is policymakers, and having sat on the sidelines for quite a long time in this space.
Who knows more?
Well, no, but it's what I've noticed, what's important, what I've learned, if anything, is that we have to bring folks along in the journey. And this is why actually, and we could talk about AI, I think it's such an exciting time to bring folks along in that journey, but we have to bring folks along because if policymakers are afraid and if they regulate from fear, we had some folks in previous panels talking about cookie banners, and do they work or do they not? And sometimes if you don't understand and you regulate something in a way that you think might answer the question, but does it really? Mm-hmm. And so part of this is making sure we bring people on this journey so that they don't regulate out of fear, they regulate in a way that actually works for people and policy as well.
You talked about AI dominating headlines, every conversation. What is that nexus of AI and the privacy policy discussion? How do you think about that? Do you think that AI will supercharge some of the challenges, or is it equally a defense kind of and an asset in the arsenal as you work from a tech and policy side to navigate?
I mean, it's where we are, right? We are now in the era of AI. And it reminds me, to date myself, of the 90s when we were beginning in the internet and I was a young little whippersnapper and figuring out policy for the internet. We are now figuring out what should the guardrails, rules of the road be for AI. And so these are conversations that are happening. I think you're going to have a panel today. People are going to be talking about it. You're seeing governments around the world at the international level, like G7 getting involved. Obviously, the United States, the White House has issued an executive order. Comments, the NIST has put out requests for comments. We've provided comments. In Europe, we have the EU AI Act. So there's a lot of policy making happening already in the AI space. But that said, there's a lot of questions about risk and how to mitigate risk. And that is essentially the job of so many of us who are here. When you think about privacy, what are we doing? We're looking at understanding risk. That's why I go out and get feedback. It's so that someone can be saying, hey, Erin, have you thought about this risk? You guys need to be thinking about that. Okay, let's bring that back. So this is a risk analysis. And it's interesting because NIST, if folks haven't realized, NIST put out this request for comment on their risk management framework around AI. So what should the framework be? We commented, lots of folks are commenting. One thing that's really interesting in this space is we've put together this program that's called Open Loop.
Yes, explain that to everyone, because I think it might be a lesser understood element of what you guys have built.
Yeah, I don't know if folks here are aware of concepts like policy prototyping or policy sandboxes. These are phrases where
you're bringing it to like a technology company level of innovation. I like it.
Right, there you go. So what the goal is to bring companies together with policymakers who are grappling, like, for example, what should this risk management framework look like for AI? Bring companies together with policymakers to talk about this. I think some previous panels were talking about the impact on small businesses and other businesses with some of these regulations. Well, how can we bring these businesses together right now as part of this Open Loop program, which we've launched with NIST in the United States? We have roughly 30 companies of all different types working together, asking questions. The goal is to produce a report that we will then submit, this group, the Open Loop group together, will submit to NIST. If folks are interested, I'm happy to provide more information after this presentation because there still is an opportunity to get engaged. So they're looking at, in this area of risk management, there's a concept, for example, called red teaming. I don't know if you've heard of this.
It's a journalism term too, actually, or rather it's used in journalism as well.
Right,
Yeah.
and it comes from cybersecurity, right? Where you're red teaming to see whether or not you're identifying risks.
Yeah.
And people are doing that around AI. And so what does that look like for companies? What is red teaming? How does that help mitigate risks? So these are the kinds of questions that are being asked through this Open Loop program, and it's a really interesting, it's a great example of this partnership that's needed in order to enable policymaking to make sense.
And as initiatives like Open Loop are in progress and as all of these discussions are happening at a global level, day in and day out, you all are still navigating a patchwork of policy approaches and regulation across the United States, across the world. How do you steward amidst such a patchwork of policy approaches? Because there's not uniformity and consistency, and I think that's going to persist, of course.
Yeah, I mean, in your previous panel was talking about LGBT in Brazil, and we've got in Europe GDPR, and so.
Right, and as a global company.
Right, and harmonization is really, hopefully, the goal. And I think certainly as you're seeing with AI, as G7 and others are getting involved, you're looking at, countries around the world are saying, can we come up with some principles that can govern this space? Because it is a challenge. Obviously, we have a team of lawyers and folks who are complying with laws that apply to us for sure. That's what we do. But it is about making sure that what are the core principles that we as a global world with a global internet where data is going to be flowing, what are those core principles that we think are needed to protect people? So it is an important point, and it's something that we're continuing to hopefully work with policymakers around harmonization.
Right, and I'm sure you must crisscross the globe having conversations with policy leaders across every region and country. Does anything stand out to you at this point about kind of where we're headed in the near to medium term?
I think what stands out is, again, innovation is going to continue to change the form factors in which that we're using to engage. So we all talked about the mobile devices. I heard people talking about it in previous panels. We are going to be in the future the metaverse, where we're going to be having these glasses on our, they already exist, but hopefully folks in this room, we come back together in 4 years, when it's leap year in 4 years, I can't believe, right, the 29th. In 4 years, everyone hopefully will be wearing these glasses and these glasses it's really interesting because they enhance the ability to hear and see and so forth. Lots of interesting questions around bystander privacy that we've been getting feedback on, bringing that back, changing how we approach these glasses, how we're making sure people understand what's happening. So I think it's just going to be a continuation of conversations, and we get input from around the world that's really, really interesting, and that is shaping the products that we're launching for people everywhere.
So far, you've described the evolution of kind of the policy work and the data and privacy work that you do over the last decade. As you kind of lift up and look at the next decade, you talked a little bit about it in terms of new products and capabilities that are being rolled out, over the course of the next couple of months and years. From a long-term perspective, where do you see the conversation going, and is there anything that we should really understand about kind of Meta's focus there?
I think the conversation will continue with AI, and I think we have these core privacy principles that we all in this room, those of us who have been doing this for a long time, transparency we talked about. We've talked about access, talked about deletion a little bit. We've talked about controls and consents. The previous panel talked about consents and tools. How do we apply these core privacy tenets that are so critical in the new era of technology? That is going to continue to require a risk assessment, risk analysis. It's going to continue to require partnership between technology companies, policymakers, academics, civil society. This collective group together is what's needed to address what's coming. So whether it's the glasses or there's going to be some new form factor, that group, the collective partnership and collaboration between those groups, technology companies, and again, policy elites and policy makers and civil society, I know that's going to be critical. I know that is going to be critical to addressing and ensuring that those privacy principles I mentioned, that we're bringing those to bear in whatever the products, whatever the technology is of the future. That's the key.
That's wonderful. Well, Erin, Egan, thank you so much for being a part of the event today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for being here.